That's from Suzanne.
That was from Jim's wife. She brought a huge bag.
Nice.
Wills is gonna make it in the nick of time. I just have the sixth sense.
She's coming.
One, I'm gonna count. One,
She texted she was gonna be a little bit
That's
late,
Kim.
but that she'd be.
three, got it.
Here she is.
All right.
Made it.
You made it.
You got Kim to open the door for her.
Before roll call.
Good timing.
I saw you come through there, and I said, I just have the sense she's gonna come in the next 3 seconds, and I counted down, and then you left.
I think you did. You were leaving.
Totally do. Have a little intel. We're gonna switch the order around just so Jamie doesn't have to wait around.
Oh, we are? Okay.
Okay, I have 6 o'clock, so we will go ahead and get started. And we're going to switch the order of things around so that Jamie does not have to stick around for the second part of the presentation. And so first up, we'll have the...
Does she know that?
She's around.
Yes.
She's here. She's here.
Sure, we're good, we're ready.
Okay.
We got it.
Okay. The
Yeah.
financial, it says sustainability, but I'll call it sobriety.
Okay.
Well,
Whatever.
okay.
But go for it.
So I'm going to be down here today. All right, so we are bringing forward to you all this evening the final report for the financial sustainability strategy that the city engaged with 110% earlier in this year to help us conduct. So, you know, we live in a beautiful city and we have a great community here. And we have beautiful man-made and natural amenities here that the city of Salida has the privilege of taking care of. And they are amenities that, you know, we really take pride in, having the ability to share these with our community members and the visiting public. And as we are learning throughout this process in the last budget season, things are getting more expensive, and it's taking us a bit more time and energy to really evaluate and focus on what it takes for us to continue to provide these services to the community. This has been a process that has taken several months. I don't want to steal Jamie's thunder. And you all have been part of this process, and we really, really appreciate that. So a number of years ago, the city of Salida established a focus area of financial sustainability. And within that focus area are the core values of transparent dialogue and information sharing, proactive and defensible decision-making, sustainable investments, and the ability to maintain and improve the investments that we have. And it's with those values and that focus area that your staff really brings forward to you recommendations and information for you all to digest and pass policy that allows staff then to implement the policy that you are interested in forwarding. This has been a labor of love. We have had fabulous conversations with a number of community members, with our advisory boards, PROST, the Public Arts Commission, City Council, Treasurer, and we fully recognize how personal a lot of this is for members of the community, and we hold that. We also understand and take the broad view that we have a lot of responsibilities at the city, and it takes all of us to understand what our role is and how much it costs and how we should be paying for the facilities that the community members use. So I'm looking forward to the comments and the conversation that we have tonight with this. And I hope that you you found it valuable when you read it, and that this can be a great conversation for us as we move forward into the 2026 budget, and looking forward beyond that, even as we continue to maintain our investments and move forward into the future as successfully as we have been coming from the past. I'll hand it over to Jamie. I also had a procedure, and so I think I have some anesthesia, so I'm kind of talky. So you can just shut me up.
You seem really happy.
As long as you're not slurring the speech.
I'm not slurring. I have a lot to say.
Okay, I guess that I'm first. Jamie's a good team player, and she made me play, so I have a role in this. But I'm just going to kind of bring the big picture and introduce her good work. Next slide, please. This is looking at a ratio of our current assets to our liabilities over time. Numbers are pulled straight out of audited financial statements. And when you have a ratio less than 1, it means that we might have a hard time paying off our liabilities with our short-term assets. A rising trend line means that we're improving our ability to, support our debt. We do have a rising trend line from 2009, but I do want you to take a look at 2022 to 2024. You do see a decline there, and the reason for the big decline between 23 and 24 is, of course, the fire station. We've also, since this is citywide, we've also had some debt related to water and wastewater facilities. Next slide. Sorry. There we go. Now we're going to look at just the general fund. The Zoom workplace is pretty cool. The blue line shows the revenue trend over time, whereas the red line is showing the expense trend over time. When the expense line is above the revenue line, we are using fund balance reserves, which we have been from 2022 on, in a reasonable amount. That's not atypical. You grow fund balance for a while and then you catch up with some projects. And in our case, I can't say they were all deferred maintenance project in those earlier years, but as you see 25, you see that gap growing to where it's about $2.5 million. Next slide. This slide is showing the portion of the pie that is the scope of what we're talking about, Parks and Rec and Arts and Culture. If you look at our whole budget, which is the whole pie, what percent is that? I can't see. 59, well, about, 59% of the budget is from non-general fund monies. And the other section, that's the dark green section, and I will say that's like the water fund, the wastewater fund. There's more flexibility in setting fees that cover deferred maintenance. We don't have the issues there that we do in the general fund. Same thing with the street fund, the tax revenue and the grants that have been going into that fund have been sufficient to maintain our streets at a level that we're pleased with, that the community seems to be pleased with. The general fund is where our struggles are. Arts and Culture and Parks and Rec represent 10% of our total spending, less of a percent in the general fund. A bigger chunk of the general fund, but the revenues are 3%. And the gap in the revenues and expenses between in just Parks and Rec and Arts and Culture is about $2.5 million. So there's a lot of ability to grow revenues there by changing the fee structure. Of course, those are all city amenities, so nobody's going to be making a recommendation that we completely cover the expenses by increasing the fees that much. But that's why this study is so important. It's an area that we have some flexibility to increase and to make sure that we're charging appropriate fees for, in order to be able to return the right revenue for those services. The remaining departments in the city do not have as much flexibility as Parks and Recs and Arts and Culture. It's hard to charge people for using police services, for instance. Next slide. The costs that you're seeing here are the costs that were submitted as part of the 2025 budget preparation and looking at the long-term plan. And this is what we identified as immediate needs for addressing deferred maintenance type projects, fire apparatus, bathrooms in the park, the police building, that sort of thing. Of everything that was requested, however, the next slide, please, will show you that we have only provided in the budget 512,000. So the gap is 10.4 million between what was requested and what we were able to fund in the budget. Next slide, please. If you take that 10.4 million and expand it, we don't do anything between now and 2038 at a 5% increase in cost each year, we could very well double that in the next however many years that is, 13 years. Doesn't take very long at all for our problems to amplify. Next slide. Is it your turn?
They're never low enough, no matter what chamber I'm in. Well, good evening. It's good to see you all again, and thank you for your time this evening. Amy, thank you for the setting the stage, the financial position and condition of the city, and Christy, of course, setting the stage for this evening. First and foremost, I would like to recognize the staff of the city of Salida who we had the pleasure of working with over the course of the last 7-8 months. Collecting the revenues and expenditures and working with us to create service categories and obviously do all of the work necessary to create and craft the report that you had delivered. Alternatively, I would also like to recognize all of you and thank you for your contributions. It is not, I won't say it's not common, but we always feel it incredibly important that elected and appointed officials are part of this process. And you made the commitment to do that. And not every city that we have the pleasure of working with makes that commitment. We're lucky sometimes to get 10 or 15 minutes. And to put all of this work into context in that short period of time is impossible. So I do want to recognize you all publicly for the work and the contributions that you've provided for this process. I'm going to start here with why this is important, and as I do that, I also want to acknowledge and recognize and maybe repeat something that Christy mentioned, and that is this is not easy work. It's easy to go in and talk about what people want and what people desire and adding services. It's not always sexy and fun to talk about the money and the fiscal stewardship that's required to run a government and to run a local government and pay the bills and balancing the revenues with the expenditures, right, the costs. And so this is hard work. And for a community, a city system, a local government to commit to doing this, I think speaks volumes about their commitment to being responsible stewards of taxpayer resources. So I want to say that right out of the gate. And I think everybody in this room, myself included, I think most, if not all of you know, I live here. And while I'm not a city resident, I'm a county resident and I'm a taxpayer. And so this is important to everybody in this room, as well as the 5,000+ other people that aren't present this evening. It's important work. And so I want to say that right out of the gate. This is critically important to not only the city of Salida. We are finding this work is important to every single local government across the United States right now. And it can be challenging, right? It can be challenging. So I wanted to just start with that. So why is this work important? Next slide, please. There are a number of reasons. You all sat through hours of content and delivery on the very topic that we're here to talk about tonight, fiscal stewardship, financial sustainability. Keep in mind, fiscal stewardship is the means by which we get to a sustainable future, right? The stewardship are the steps, the methods, the practices that we employ to get to sustainable systems. And so I've kind of summarized what we believe in our work, and obviously some of the reveals through this process kind of percolated to the top in terms of the importance of this work. The first, of course, is a strategy informed by reality. Amy set the stage in a very abbreviated fashion with what the reality here is in the city of Salida. And among the city system realities are, of course, your expenditures are outpacing your revenues. Costs are going up, which that's no surprise, right? Think about your own pocketbook. Our costs are going up, and we've got to maintain the revenues to be able to pay the bills. Alternatively, financial sustainability work addresses gaps between expectations and resources. Communities have expectations, and there's a difference between wants and demands and needs. People want things, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's human nature, but a local government's got to figure out what you can provide reasonably and responsibly so that you can pay the bills and have the biggest impact on the community. The purpose that sets systems up to endure. We talk a lot about the idea that maybe an interest group wants something in the moment, but it's up to the local government to endure for future generations. This is an exercise in thinking about the citizens of 2050 and not just the citizens of 2025. And then finally, as I mentioned, this is about responsible stewardship. The decisions you make, the practices that the staff employ is all about how they're managing these resources moving forward. So really important work. And again, I want to applaud all of you for the commitment that you've made to creating a strategy and being open to thoughts about how do we move forward in the most responsible way. Next slide, please. So quick process review. This will be a repeat for, I think, everybody in the room, but I think it's important to get the process back in front of you. Just a reminder of how we arrived at what we did. Next slide, please. So we use the three-legged stool approach. It's a methodology that we use with parks, recreation, arts, culture, community services systems across the United States. The intention is by way of building, if you will, the three legs, you're going to create a tax use and revenue enhancement philosophy. Again, I'll repeat that. How we're going to spend and invest taxpayer resources and how we're going to think about revenue generating opportunities as we move forward. Next slide, please. So I'll break down the stool again, rather abbreviated. I know all of you sat through the work sessions where we got into the details of this. The first thing we do is create service categories. Next slide, please. Why we create categories, it's a different way of thinking about bucketing the services of the system. So parks, arts, recreation, culture services, there's a myriad of services available in this community. Park shelter rentals, swim classes, day camps, and so on. And rather than suggesting that we're going to identify a cost recovery or financial sustainability strategy for any one service, we're going to bucket those services based upon their purpose. The principal reasons that we do this is, number one, I would suggest probably the priority reason is that it allows us to diminish any one individual's social values, imposing their will, saying, well, this service is much more important than everything else in the community. It allows us to look at the purpose of the service. What's the intent, right? What's the intended outcome? Alternatively, it helps us eliminate arbitrary decision-making when making decisions or recommendations around goals, and it aligns with equity-based decisions, meaning we're not going to look at someone's special interest or their age in making decisions. We're going to think about this, again, through the lens of purpose. Next slide, please. What you see here is an eye chart, but this is a snapshot of the service categories of the organization. Nothing about this is static. It is always our encouragement and suggestion that organizations continue to look at this to ensure that it is as relevant as possible. But this organization worked very hard to create this list of categories to represent the entire service menu of the organization. And you all saw the working draft of this. There have been a couple of minor adjustments, but nothing significant, nothing major. Some tweaks to words, and a few other minor things since the draft that you all saw quite a few months ago. Next slide, please. The next leg of the stool, if you will, is beneficiary of service. Next slide, please. And this is where we connect the dots between the beneficiary of services and who should pay, whether it's the taxpayers, the individual, or maybe a little bit of both. You may recall participating in the beneficiary of service workshop at the Scout Hut, and what you did was you took those service categories and you ranked them, not prioritized them, but ranked them from the category you believe align most with the idea of common good. And there's a definition around common good, to the category that you believe to align most with individual or exclusive benefit. And essentially that results in what we call a beneficiary of service model. Next slide, please. This was the result of that work. The staff contributed, the committees contributed, and the city council contributed to the placement, if you will, the ranking of those categories on this continuum from the category you believe aligns most with common good in the bottom left to the category you believe to be most exclusive. This sets the stage for how we begin to think about cost recovery and/or subsidy allocation goals. Next slide, please. And last but not least, cost of service. So this is the heavy lifting of the process. This is the part that takes the longest. It's the backbone, I like to say. And this is where we work with the organization, Amy and her team, to collect revenues, collect expenditures, do the math, do the analysis to understand what it costs to provide services to the community. We tend to not do this in government. We tend to not understand what the cost is to provide services. This is a critically important part of this work. Next slide, please. As a result of the cost of service analysis and all of the details been provided to the organization, you saw some snapshots, screenshots of some of the results in the back of the report. But what that allowed the organization to do was to be very intentional and intelligent in setting goals that could be practical and were logical and also aligned with the categories ranking and the continuum. The expectation is taxpayer resources are invested more heavily in the categories that align most with the common good, influencing and affecting everyone in this community to some degree. 2, a higher cost recovery expectation for those services that are on the top right of the continuum, or essentially those categories that are more exclusive. They provide more exclusive services where the beneficiaries tend to be the users and the users alone. And so this is what resulted from the work. You will notice there are 2 goals included under each category. The green represents cost recovery. The red, or kind of fuchsia color, represents subsidy goals. Keep in mind, cost recovery is what you're generating. Subsidy is how you are spending your taxpayer dollars. There are more systems now including subsidy goals on their continuums simply because they want people to understand here's where we're spending taxpayer resources. When we only look at cost recovery, it's a more narrow lens, and we tend to have folks think, well, this is only about making money. If anything is subsidized, even a penny, it is not generating a profit. Very few things in local government generate excess revenues or a profit. There's a heavy dependence on taxpayer resources. The question for all of you as stewards and shepherds of this work is how much can you afford to subsidize and to what degree all of the services you offer. So what you see in front of you is the model that was completed in June and again included in your report. Next slide, please. And I'm going to go through pretty high level. You hopefully all had an opportunity to review the recommendations in detail. I'm certainly going to be open to questions as a result. But I did just include all of the recommendations here, and I'll touch on each of them pretty high level as I get to the conclusion of the presentation. Before I do that, though, I want to emphasize something. We talk a lot, and it's even been mentioned here this evening, that this is about increasing fees. That may be part of your strategy. That is part of the strategy, certainly to a degree, but there are other ways to accomplish goals. And I think that's important to emphasize. First of all, when we partner with other organizations, meaning there's reciprocal benefit, we give and we get in return. That's a way for us to best use resources and possibly reduce our expenditures, potentially generate more interest in a service. Partnerships are a tremendous way to adjust or to affect our ability to realize our goals. Alternatively, we've gotten away to some degree using the word efficiency. and thinking about optimizing our resources. Are we optimizing our space? Are we optimizing our staff time? Are we optimizing our financial resources? That's another opportunity for us to achieve our goals. Third, of course, is implementing fees where maybe we've been essentially providing services at no cost and maybe we shouldn't have, and or increasing fees where it is responsible and fair and just. And then, of course, increasing usage, as we say in the business, putting more butts in seats. We tend to keep holding on to services and going, well, why aren't people participating? Maybe it's because it's just not a good service anymore. Maybe people just aren't interested anymore. Alternatively, maybe we're not doing the best job of providing the service at a high quality level. And if we were, could we increase utilization? That allows us, again, an opportunity to realize our goals. And then the last one I wanted to put a caveat on. Grants, sponsorship, donations. We're in a community, 5,500 people in a county of 20,000 people with over 100 nonprofits. We've got 4 governmental entities here. There's a lot of duplication of service. There's a lot of stepping on toes. And the idea that there's going to be plentiful sponsorships and donations is really a difficult proposition to buy into. And we all know, everyone in this room, that grants are difficult to come by as they are or as they were, and now they're even more challenging. So we've got to be very careful about relying or leaning on these resources. It doesn't mean they may not be available and they may be helpful, but there's a cautionary tale about relying on these resources today. So I wanted to emphasize the fact that increases in pricing is certainly an option, but it is not the only option to meet our goals. Next slide, please. So as we go through the process recommendations here, again, these are all detailed in the report. I'll start with this first slide. I think I've got 3 or 4 slides of our recommendations that are included in the final report. Cease discounting practices. Essentially, the suggestion is government is not in the business of providing discounts. It is not a fair or just approach for governments to employ that particular practice. And our recommendation is essentially to cease discounting practices as a system. I want to throw the caveat out that there are going to be people in every community who have need. Scholarships and reduced rates are the opportunity to be able to provide for those who need assistance. But just kind of generically, if you will, haphazardly applying discounting is not a practice that we encourage among any system. Discontinuation of codified fees. While codification certainly I think had its life and its place in time, today with a volatile economy and uncertainty around inflation and adjustments to expenses, it really kind of strangles and handcuffs professional staff to be able to react and respond to the economy. When you've got a strategy that has goals, the goals become the litmus test, if you will, in terms of how you're going to set your fees. So our suggestion and recommendation is to discontinue codification of fees. Meeting cost recovery subsidy allocation goals, that may seem obvious, but it's a strong recommendation. We hope that you'll work towards meeting the goals that have been established. Seeking out opportunities for reinvestment, particularly as it relates to your infrastructure here. Amy shared with you a few slides. There's a growing infrastructure backlog here. For a community of 5,500, I'll tell you, I have the pleasure, privilege of working all across the United States. There are a lot of assets in a community with 5,500 people. To have an aquatic center, right? To have a STEAM plant, an arts facility, to have the amenities. We have 16 public parks that are local parks, to have all of the other amenities here, to have this beautiful historic building. They all come at a price. They're all expensive to maintain. And so this idea that you're going to have opportunities to reinvest, potentially additional revenues that you can put into your infrastructure could absolutely be a gift in many ways. Adopting success metrics. One of the things that will be shared here shortly is a policy specific to financial sustainability. We've encouraged by way of our recommendation to include success metrics. So it's very clear these are the things that we are working towards. If we don't achieve these things, then we're going to have to make some decisions about divestment of service. It doesn't make sense for the city of Salida to continue to provide these services if we're not realizing these success metrics. Eliminating contractor splits. I'll just suggest a general practice, a very common practice that we suggest eliminating. This is essentially just saying we're going to split 60-40, 70-30 with a contractor who comes in and provides the service. there's really no basis for those numbers. 80-20, 60-40, 70-30, they're very arbitrary. So our suggestion is to understand the cost of doing business and then make decisions about what those contractor splits, if you will, should be, but not necessarily just use these kind of arbitrary splits. Next slide, please. Consider alternative revenue generating opportunities. May seem obvious, but what other things can you do as a system to generate revenues that are practical and pragmatic? Conduct cost of service analysis updates and include capital expenditures to reflect complete cost of service. While we did an analysis of direct and indirect expenses, your infrastructure was not part of that. Every time something's held in this facility, there's an impact on the infrastructure. The infrastructure tag, price tag, has to be paid for. Think about the aquatic center. Every time somebody's swimming in that pool, there's an impact. And so how can you begin to think about applying the expense of the asset to the cost of service? Developing a financial sustainability policy. Christy will speak to this here shortly. It is our strong recommendation that you actually have a policy that supports this work, that supports the staff's ability to do the work and implement the work, that speaks to not only why this work is important, but how the staff are going to actually do the work moving forward. And this, of course, as a policy, and you are a policy-making body, we would hope that the council would support and then obviously adopt that policy. Conduct a comprehensive conditions assessment. Again, going back to the data that Amy shared earlier, conditions assessment is specifically about or around analyzing, assessing the condition of all of your physical assets, your buildings, your structures, and understanding what your maintenance backlog is. You've got a $10 million price tag right now, but that is not all inclusive. That is specific to some specific assets. No one can really know unless you do a conditions assessment what that total price tag actually is. Adopt a philosophy and policy which guides acquisition and development. The cautionary tale around this, particularly in this quality of life services, oh, there's land, let's acquire it and build a park. That's not necessarily always the best thing to do. And so our suggestion, and again, there's some very specific reference to this particular item, is being very thoughtful about what the philosophy of the organization is relative to acquiring any new asset as you move forward. Again, you're just adding liabilities to a system that's already challenged. Next slide. Explore the possibility of applying exactions, impact fees. Again, this is about development. Every time a new home is built, for example, in a community, it impacts the infrastructure of the city. And so impact fees are a very practical, very pragmatic, and very responsible approach to applying impact fees where it makes sense. Those get reinvested into systems so they can take care of their infrastructure. Conducting annual evaluation of services. Diesel and I have talked about this, essentially just ensuring that every service is evaluated for its effectiveness. It's evaluated for customer satisfaction, certainly, but it's also evaluated specific to the financial investments that need to be made and the returns on investment and how it applies and aligns with the strategy that you saw earlier. Reviewing and evaluating existing partner agreements, MOUs, and JUAs. These are just to ensure that we're being responsible to our taxpayers. How are we spending and investing their money? This is their resource, and how are we as a city stewarding and shepherding those resources? There are oftentimes organizations that refer to themselves as partners, but they're not necessarily partners. They're simply receiving grants from the city, the local government. A partner is a reciprocal relationship. So we have some suggested thoughts and kind of a checklist around how to make sure you're evaluating and reviewing those agreements so that they're fair and just to the city and its citizens. Updating existing partner agreements, similarly, just making sure those are relevant and they're up to date in terms of current reality. Revisiting the Chaffee County Provider Network. This actually was started back in 2019 as part of the Park and Recreation Master Plan. Arts and culture wasn't an active player in that at the time. This is where you bring all of your your providers from the region, we'll say the county, who provide parks, arts, recreation, and culture services, and best understand who's doing what so that you're not duplicating. You're fostering and championing new relationships and new partnerships moving forward. And then, of course, an extension of that is identifying new partner opportunities if indeed those are available. The last three items here, exploring public-private redevelopment partnerships for the golf course site. You've got an incredibly valuable piece of property that is part of the park and recreation system in particular, and questions concerning its productivity in the community. How can it contribute to the overall community wealth here in potentially a different way? You've got an old asset that sits on that property, suggesting looking at potential P3 partnerships, public-private partnerships to enhance that property and potentially, again, invest tax revenues into the community. And there's some detail in that recommendation in your report. Developing and implementing a comprehensive community engagement and communication strategy. That's essentially ensuring that the city does its darndest and its best to help citizens here understand this work, why it's important, what does it mean to them, even if they're not an active player. The majority of people in this community don't participate in your structured services. Most, they'll go to parks, they'll go to trails, but they're taxpayers like everyone else. And how can you help them understand what this is and why it is so important to the city of Salida? And the last item here is a bit out of order, and that was done with intention, because I know I will suggest, typically I get questions about, what do you mean by strategic pricing, and how is that going to really look for the system, and what does incremental change mean, and those kinds of things. And that language was used in the report, so I want to spend some time on this one. So implementing strategic pricing is being thoughtful. We frown upon arbitrary pricing, $20, $50, let's raise fees $2 or $3. That doesn't work, and it has not worked, and it's created a lot of strife and anxiety for systems. So I'm going to share with you a couple of examples of how to apply strategic pricing. I want to mention, though, before we get to those, cost recovery pricing, as we call it, is the default, meaning we're going to price to meet our goals. But there are alternative strategies that can be employed as well. And so as you read that recommendation, hopefully that'll make a little bit more sense to you. There's market pricing, penetration pricing, premium pricing. There's all kinds of strategies. So let me share with you our thoughts on, next slide, please. This idea of incremental change. We talk about incremental change a lot when it comes to this work. This work, again, is challenging and it's difficult for some systems. And you say, okay, well, we want to make a change and we understand the importance of it, but where do we start? Emphasizing again that pricing is one part of the equation, if you will, and it's one strategy to get us there. But this is a very practical strategy, and it will be employed in the city of Salida if the strategy and recommendations are followed. So I've selected two services to kind of walk you through how you might, this is just how you might consider adjustments to prices. And these are real examples. These are real services that are offered by way of parks, arts, recreation, and culture. So example one is dodgeball. There's an adult dodgeball league here. I don't know if any of you participate. Oh, yeah. There you go. All right. Woof, woof, woof. But I'm going to walk you through kind of the math. We talk a lot about doing the math in this work, and it's important to do the math. And so this is essentially a mathematical exercise. In the blue box, and I'm going to be very deliberate walking through this, and I will certainly take any questions that you have. Let's look at the 2025 price for dodgeball. It's $20 per player. That's the price. So that's the cost to the user. And in 2025, there were 74 players. They get approximately 7 games. So there's 6 regular season games and then minimally 1 playoff game. Okay, so we just use the 7 as the baseline. The total revenues that the city received were $1,480 for a cost recovery of 20%. The total expenditures to provide this service, think all expenses, everything, staff time, space, all of it, were $7,527, or a subsidy of 80%. If we then shift from just using percentages to really make this make sense to folks, that subsidy equals $6,047 in taxpayer money that was given, invested, that benefited the dodgeball participants and players. That's $82 per player, okay? This is where breaking this down becomes really insightful. Now, looking at this service on the continuum, on your strategy continuum, your goal, the midpoint goal for this service is 75%, and you're currently at 20%. That can feel very overwhelming. Like, well, how are we gonna go from 20% to 75%? Some might say, well, people won't pay that. Well, then you have to make a decision as to whether or not you're willing to continue to invest that subsidy in this service or not. And if you are willing to invest in that service, you need to understand that that $6,000 is going to go towards this service and not in another, whatever that might be. Alternatively, if we do the math, we begin to understand that we could potentially meet the goal if we just think about this a little bit differently. So we've just put together a 3-year plan, again, and assuming current utilization, everything else remains the same. If you look at the bottom left there, 3-year plan, cost of service in 2026. So our cost of service back in the blue box in 2025, total expenses was $7,527. We've got to understand that we have to apply inflation year over year. If we don't, and we continue to bring in the same amount of revenue and our expenses go up, our gap is just going to continue to get bigger, and we can't have that. So in 2026, if we take that 7527 from 2025 and we apply a 4% inflationary rate, and we just picked 4% because it's been fluctuating between 3 and 4% for a while now. That means the cost of this service in 2026 is going to be $7,828. If you look right below that, in 2027, we apply another 4% for a total expected expenditure of $8,141, and then in 2028, the cost will be $8,466. So we've applied that 4%. It begins to help us understand what's this going to cost. Again, all things remaining equal, let's assume we have the same 74 players. Now, what we want to do is, and again, bear with me here, we're at 20% cost recovery performance today. If we want to get to 75%, that's a 55% difference that we have to make up. So we may simply say, let's divvy that up by 3, divide it by 3. That 55% divided by 3. So let's suggest in 2026, we want to get to 39% cost recovery, right? We're going to go from 20 to 39. We say 39% of that total expense in 2026 means we need to generate $3,052.94 from those 74 players. That means the price of our service, without rounding up, is $41.26. If we break that down, that means we're charging $6.88 a game. A game's 50 minutes to 60 minutes. The average leisure experience in the United States today is $20. We are well below that threshold. We're charging $6.88 per game. It takes the sticker shock away sometimes to break it down into an hourly or a per game. Alternatively, in 2027 then, if we're going to continue to move the needle and get towards our goal, 58% of that expense means we need to generate $4,721. That's $63.80 we'd be charging for those 7 games. That's $10.63 a game. And then in that 3rd year, if we can get to that next break, which would be 77%, that's $6,519 in revenues we generate, meaning we charge $88 for the league. That's $14.68 a game. This gives you an idea of how we can break this down into more practical, reasonable parts and pieces to get us to move towards our goal. I'm going to pause here and see if you have any questions on this.
Wales, how long is a dodgeball game?
Like 10, 15 minutes. So paying $40 for the season to play for 10 to 15 minutes each time, I think it would be difficult, I believe, to like get people to sign up. Something I just wrote down here too, just intramural sports leagues in general. From what I've observed in my participation, if we don't have enough players for the night, we will text a friend, hey, can you come play? This friend probably isn't registered because it's last minute, which means they haven't signed a waiver. They didn't pay the $20. There aren't officials there who are checking these things. So we are paying city staff to be there at the games. Mm-hmm. They are not, and I mean, there's a lot going on, but they don't maybe have the capacity to check to make sure that every player is signed up, registered, and paid for. That's my only feedback with like this specific this specific example of intramural leagues in general. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, that's the, I think that's the problem we're going to run into, is that we have these things that aren't being run optimally. Mm-hmm. So we have a vehicle and we pop it in a neutral and we have like a donkey running the thing, and now we're just talking about putting premium fuel into that vehicle instead of maybe using the motor. I think that's kind of where we get into a snafu when we're just when we're talking pricing over just optimal usage of staff time or a facility usage, where there's like a steam plant, you have a stage, you have an annex, you have a ballroom, and are all three of those things being used at the same time or optimally or scheduled right? Like, that's why it's kind of hard having this conversation the way we are.
Doesn't, sorry, you gonna go?
Oh, no, yeah, I'm done.
Doesn't, isn't that kind of built in? I mean, right now, we're just talking about pricing structure for the simplicity of it, but there's opportunities within each of those years, with the price breakdown as it is, to recoup the percentage, by optimizing staff time, like you all are talking about. It doesn't just have to be pricing, but I think it's for the simplicity of the model.
Yeah, this gives you an idea, again, of this idea of price changes over a period of time, how it works, some of the thought process behind it. Optimization, obviously, that's why you have the staff, right? That's their charge, is to optimize the resources to the best of their ability. But we wanted to make sure, when we talk about strategic pricing and price changes, that there was some depth to the conversation around how this might look. And this was one of the services that was called out as an option.
And one of the challenges I think we face is we're a community of special interests, and special interests have gotten used to getting what they want. And a lot of times it's the squeaky wheel syndrome, and I think it's just there'll probably be some pushback, resistance, but at the end of the day, we need to get everyone thinking in regards of the greater community. And like, I look at some of these things, I'm not a dodgeball player, but there's other things I do, and it's probably not the best and most efficient use of city dollars to spend 10 or 15 grand on something that only benefits 0.2% of the population.
Yeah. And that's part of the complexity of this work,
Yeah.
to your point. You know, you look at the subsidy this year, if I wrote you a check for $6,000, what could you do with it to have a big impact on the community?
Yeah.
So that's the rub, right? That's the rub, so. All right, next slide, please. And the other service that we're using to share some price adjustments, you know, a methodology and approach would be rentals. And this is in particular the public rentals, concerts, and performances. 2025 price was $94 an hour, or $750 for an 8-hour rental. I did put an asterisk on this one because through our work, and staff have acknowledged this, over the last few years, there have been inconsistencies in application of pricing. You had some users using the facilities for 4, 5, 6 hours, not paying anything. Others using it for a few hours, paying $30, $40 an hour. Others paying the rate that was publicized. So that in and of itself created a bit of a challenge for the analysis for this particular area. But I do want to share with you some of the insights that resulted in how, again, this system may think about price adjustments moving forward. So again, 2025 price, $94 an hour, $750 for 8-hour rental, total expense. And I want to clarify, when it came to rentals, particularly the steam plant, you have a campus. It was just mentioned, Justin just mentioned, you've got an annex, you've got a ballroom, you've got a plaza, you've got the theater. That's a campus. And the attribution of indirect expenses to some kind of facility like that can be challenging. So I'm just sharing with you, for the purposes of this evening's price adjustment example here, your direct expense for that theater alone is $210 an hour. You're charging $94 to some people, or some users, and some you're not. The subsidy, if the user's paying the $94 an hour, is $116 per hour that's coming from the tax resources. It's not coming from the direct user, it's coming from the taxpayer. Looking at your goal, where this particular category is on the continuum, your midpoint is 80%. So what might that look like? And if we break that statistical analysis at the top up, it's kind of weak to call it an analysis based on those 4 bullets, but you're at a 14% cost recovery right now in this area. Your goal is 80. It's a pretty big range to overcome. So if we look at the 3-year plan, you can see on the left again, bottom left, I did something similar here. We used a 4% adjustment for inflation, taking the 2025 total expense of $210 per hour, multiply that times 4%. That means in 2026, you can anticipate $218.40 per hour being your direct expense, 2027, $227 and change, and 2028, $236.22. The performances and concerts, public rentals, were used 467 hours in the theater. So if we use just that bit of information, those data sets, if we're trying to close the gap, if you will, bridge the gap between the current performance and the 80%, on the bottom right, you can see again an example of how this might work. Let's say we want to get to 50% in 2026. Keep in mind, 50% cost recovery means you're still subsidizing at 50%. 50% of $218.40 means you charge $109.20 an hour rather than the $94. 65% in 2027 would mean we're going to charge $147.64 an hour. And in 2028, if we wanted to do this in a 3-year window, to get to 80%, we would charge $188.98 an hour. Again, just to illustrate how this would work, this idea of incremental change, pricing adjustments, this was intended to give you an idea. Dodgeball being one example, rentals, concerts, and performances being the other example. I do want to also mention, bottom right there, rather small print. While this wasn't a recommendation in the report per se, as I put this together, I would suggest that there be some consideration for an infrastructure investment fee being added at the steam plant, potentially even the aquatic facility, because you have pretty significant maintenance backlog at both of those really special assets. And the users are those that are having an impact on the infrastructure. So if you were to consider an infrastructure investment fee, it would be designated for investment and upkeep and maintenance and essentially the caring of this particular asset. And then the last item there, you probably all could draw the conclusion. I think it's important that there's a charging that's fair and just, meaning everybody pays the same rate, as opposed to some are getting those discounts while others are not. So these, again, were intended to be a couple of examples of how this idea of incremental change and pricing adjustments can actually take place. It just gives you an idea of what 2 very different examples might look like. So,
Jamie, can I ask
yes.
a question real quick? For the infrastructure investment fee, do you think that looks more like for rental, let's see the people who are applying, the organization applying, or is it something that you would have if somebody wants to do a day pass, they're in town swimming, is that something that every customer is paying, or is that something that you would more likely see, again, just with applications?
Yeah, you could apply it a variety of different ways. Just to give you a practical example, when I worked for the city of Boulder, we had a fee specifically for, these major sports events that came to town that were supposed to generate all this money for the economy, and they weren't. And so the idea was those folks were having a huge impact. Those assets were highly valuable. We were holding international tournaments at one of our soccer complexes. We were charging the organizations that were actually renting the space, and we were charging, if you will, every person that came through the gate. You could apply it that way. Mm-hmm. You could apply it to a basic swim class, right? 2%, 3%, 5%. It'd be up to Amy and Christy and Diesel and the team to figure out what is it that's going to help us close that $10 million gap over time. You're not going to charge, people hundreds of dollars by any means, but if you were just to add that infrastructure investment fee and help people understand it's to take care of this asset, you could apply it, again, memberships, gates, to the rental fee, whatever it might be, whatever makes the most sense for the system. I wouldn't say it's a one-size-fits-all. Okay. So it's a good question. Okay, next slide, please. Christy?
That's me. Wonderful. So kind of what is the next step for us? Staff really, as you all are aware, we love policies. We like knowing what we're getting into with everybody. So the next step as far as what staff sees is developing that financial sustainability policy for the Prost and PAC to, review and hopefully support, and then to bring that forward for council's review and support as well, or any changes that we want to make. We are at a place right now with particularly the steam plant, where we're trying to move forward with reservations for 2026. And we're feeling, slightly behind the 8 ball here, and not being able to really make those make those reservations without having this conversation with council first. So obviously the staff is interested in understanding what council thinks of this strategy, the recommendations, your direction, and hopefully then we can start creating that policy and moving forward with making those reservations, particularly at the steam plant.
So who'd like to start? Give a little direction.
I'll start.
Okay, go ahead. Then I'll
Yeah,
go to Dominique.
I think that this plan looks great. It was shocking to me how little cost recovery that there actually is, that we are over subsidizing things way beyond our ability. I see eventually that some of these services are going to go away, just like when a lot of sports teams were dependent on volunteers. They've really shifted that responsibility to the city and to the taxpayers. And as you pointed out, Jamie, not everybody wants to pay for the pool. Not everybody wants to pay for adult sports or children's sports. And so some of that burden has to be shifted over. And I think this is a very sound approach. One of the things that people just don't do in their personal lives or in government is figure out what things cost. And so over time, we see that things just tend to become dilapidated. People's homes, for example, when they're very old and they're unable to paint the outside of their house, it's not painted. And so we have to be responsible and create a path forward. We can't just have all the infrastructure crumble. We've seen that happen at the federal parks level, where the infrastructure is beyond repair. And that's not responsible. We can't do that.
Thank you. Councilmember Nacarado, and then Martin, and then I believe Critelli.
Yeah.
Okay.
I appreciate how comprehensive the list of recommendations is. I think it's, it just feels like the next phase in our city's evolution, really. One of the biggest things I say when people ask me like how the city's changed since the city that I knew as a kid is that we have these community gathering events and spaces, and it's really, really important for community resilience and just making it a nice place to live. So I think that there's an important balance for us to strike, where we start to look at this as a business through these recommendations, but not a for-profit business, but a sustainable business plan. And so I really appreciate that. The strategic pricing idea. I love that cease discounting came first on the list, because I can't tell you how heartbreaking it is to have worked for a nonprofit that was paying full price for these facilities to find out that others are not. And I don't say that to ask people to feel sorry for me, but for the public really, and those nonprofits who are going to have to make that adjustment to understand that really wasn't fair for others in the community. So I think I'm excited to move forward with this.
Councilmember Martin.
Jamie, I have a question about, so you recommend, like we can use partnerships as one of the strategies, but you also are suggesting eliminating contractor splits. And I'm curious what the difference is.
So a contractor example, we hire somebody to come in and teach a class. Essentially the alternative to having an employee. And we generate revenues, we give them a 60-40, 70-30 split. Those are arbitrary splits. A partner is Garna and the city of Salida working together to best use their resources, not duplicate efforts. They bring staff and time and money to the table. The city brings staff, time, and money to the table. There's an equivalency to the contributions both are making. They are a dynamic duo, if you will, because now they're providing a service in a more efficient, optimized manner, and it's probably better because we're using their skill sets and ours. And I continue to point to Dominique. I know she's not working with Garn anymore, but So they're different things. Contractor splits is just a way that I would suggest the community service, quality of life profession in local government has practiced hiring people to come in, if you will, as contractors, and then just arbitrarily saying we'll do 70-30, 80-20, 60-40. And I would suggest almost in every case I'm aware of, contractors are doing really well, and it's coming on the backs of the organization. So there are two different issues, if you will.
Okay, thank you.
Did that address your
Yes,
question?
yeah, that helped, thank you. And then you mentioned making or creating policy which guides acquisition and development of land. I want to check in with Diesel on this because we did develop that standard manual for parks, and I'm curious if you feel like is that still good? Is that enough policy? Is there more policy needed?
No, I think that's fine. I think what Jamie's referencing is more getting to the table early, which we have started doing when we have conversations about starting at annexation and into early pre-development and development concepts, and really coming to terms with, is this a piece of land that we feel that we can responsibly inherit as a park, therefore ask the developer to dedicate it as a park. We'll have a conversation tomorrow about a dedication that we don't want to take on the responsibility for managing. So I think that's what she's referencing, that we have to be really strategic in saying this is worth it and this is not, because maybe we don't need to continue. I've had this conversation with you in planning before about why would we have a 3/4 of an acre park? It's gonna cost us more money to get there than the benefit. So I think the standards manual and development manual is already proven to be pretty useful, both in the development of Cleora and as other developments come online. But I think the root of this conversation is more like, people think that I'm always going to be asking for the park. I'm not. I understand the burden that it creates, and there are some places where it's just not appropriate, and we can't afford it. I think we've had this conversation already about just how strapped we are, boom, now, as of the end of the summer when we finally build out Cleora.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So Councilmember Critelli, did you have? No.
Oh, yeah. I couldn't get into contact with anybody that was around for this time where we as a city had established an arts department. Maybe Kim was around and paying attention, but at that time, how did it start? How did arts start here as far as city involvement? Was it a vote? Was it nobody in this room would have been there or been paying attention. I tried calling like old mayors, and it was like even before Chuck's time. And I reached out to some people I just didn't hear back from. But I think that because right now I'm seeing, like, with this presentation, I'm seeing parks, art, recreation, and culture, and it's all being bundled. And we have our director of Parks and Rec now also overseeing the arts, and they're being bundled. And I don't know, I think it changes the conversation if we figure out, like, how was the arts established? If it was a vote, like if people voted to have an arts department, it puts it in a different category, I would think, in my mind, than Parks and Rec. That's kind of like a perfunctory, mechanism of a city to just want to have.
I don't think it was a vote.
Okay.
That's not generally how departments are created. I thought that with the taking on of the steam plant and I believe it kind of metamorphosized into an arts and culture department as we took on those amenities, the creative arts district. So I think that Diesel can probably speak more to this as well, but I don't believe it was a vote.
Okay, because it is like it's not like a common thing for cities to have.
It's pretty common.
It's pretty common. It's
From
pretty
what I've
common.
been learning. My perspective rolling in. So, Trish Buse, Donna Rhodes, Trish Buse, Teresa Casey, my predecessors at the pool. They were the managers of the pool. And in that, they managed recreational programs out of the pool. Every once in a while, there would be very, very few, if any, outside of the pool recreational programs. No soccer, no baseball, nothing like that. Every once in a while, there'd be an event, touch a truck, bike fest, something like that, that was kind of run from out of that group of people in the pool. And then the Friends of the Steam Plant formed, got the steam plant, got a grant, fixed up the steam plant, and donated it to the city. The city, out of the pool, hired a steam plant manager, Michael Varnum. And he was the first, right? And so Michael was operating as the steam plant manager under Teresa Casey, who was managing the pool, also getting grants for playgrounds, right? That was another thing that Teresa kind of had a knack for, Riverside and some things like that. Then Teresa Casey announces her retirement. At some point, this council or someone operationally decided, we want to have a Department of Parks and Recreation now. There had never been a Department of Parks and Recreation. And with that, we want to try to do a Department of Arts and Culture, separate, that is not under, the Arts, Parks, Recreation, and Culture, Quality of Life, or Cultural Services, they're often called in other municipalities. And so operated that way for a few years. And then with the retirement of Michael Varnum, with a need to have some direction and oversight. That's where I was asked to just provide some oversight, take a look. And I had already been through this financial sustainability process with Jamie with Parks and Recreation, and pretty much said, I think we can do this, but we have to do this first. We have to find out exactly how much these things cost, how much we need to make, because I can't stand up here and justify charging some and not charging others.
I just want to add one more point to the history lesson. Arts and culture was originally envisioned as an enterprise, meaning it was set up as an enterprise fund, so the intention was that it would be fully self-supporting. It never turned out to be that way, and we don't expect it to be now, but that was the original intention.
Yeah, I guess it just seemed like because there's a separation there was a reason that it wasn't always just kind of bundled as, because I would imagine other communities, if they do have art, it's somehow linked to parks and rec.
What we have found is that a lot of communities have cultural services departments,
Right.
which take on all of these functions.
Also cemeteries and libraries and
yes.
golf cart courses and
Yeah,
golf carts. I already have 2 of those.
Okay. Well,
And I don't know, Jamie has some perspective on how other communities do it, but while I'm up here, was there anything else you wanted me to speak to?
I have a question for you.
Oh, we'll go, I'm going to make sure everyone gets, and then we'll come back. Sure. So, Councilmember Fontaine.
It sounds like, well, I am definitely in support of moving forward with talking about the fees and implementing that process. I think there's a few of us in here also kind of ready to take that next step. So my question is, what is the timeline? When can we do it? And I mean, how burdensome is that on staff to go ahead and start this process? If we say, let's go, let's start this process to try and write.
Sooner the better, right?
Write it, yeah, to write where we have all been in class and agreed to where our subsidy is and where our recovery is. How do we go?
Requested direction. Should we follow the recommendations, yes or no? If I'm hearing a yes, over what time frame? Jamie gave a 3-year example. I've been playing out in scenarios of 5-year example. We could go a 10-year example and say over the next 10 years, we're going to go from 14% recovery to 80% recovery. Make it real easy on everyone. I imagine everyone behind me is shaking their head.
Amy, it's Amy. Amy and Christie.
Right. And to address the other part of the question, we're in a, with this transition, there has been a lot of resource reallocation, and we're trying to really build a strong foundation organizationally, the structure of the arts and culture department. Who are supervisors? What's a manager? What would my role? What do we have for event coordinators, and how do they participate in theater events specifically? What is Tina Grauman's role? And so we've been doing a lot of that work recently, and we are dying to get this done. I'm looking at 3 months to have a solid, like, we can justify, well, geez, I mean, depending on the motivation, I don't know, I'm looking at Kim. Kim and I would be.
Kim wants it done now because she's tired of people yelling at her
Yeah.
to figure out what the 2026 budget is. So
That's true.
her reservation.
What Jamie demonstrated is pretty straightforward. If you say we want to get to our cost recovery goals within 5 years, then I can just do the math. If you tell me you want it in 1 year, I'm probably not going to have a job. I probably won't be here for it. Yeah.
You would be in witness protection.
So, I mean, that's the conversation that you guys need to have. And again, this is why I said this is the first thing that needs to happen, because at no point is it Diesel said. Diesel said I would get this discount, or Diesel said I wouldn't, or Diesel said this, or Diesel said that. Like, we need to collectively decide, this is what we're going to do in good conscience and sound mind, and we will proceed and do whatever. We don't allow dogs in parks because you told me, don't allow dogs in parks. Like, people say, oh, Diesel, why did you do that? I'm not doing anything. I'm following your direction. So, this is what we're here for. That exact question, you tell me what to do, and we will make it happen. A few points of clarification that I don't think got to in the presentation. We made it very clear that there are events and rentals, or permits and rentals public, and permits and rentals private. Permits and rentals public is anyone that rents a city facility that would allow the public to attend what they do. Performances, concerts. The arts and culture does not rent it from ourselves and put on that concert. This would be Salida's Next Last Waltz would be an example. An outside organization renting, now, is it all greater good or, sole benefit? You can be the judge of that, but we have decided that that is public. Even though the tickets could be $2,000, the public is still invited. You could go. Then there are private rentals. You cannot go to Molly's wedding. That is a private rental.
Never saw Wedding Crashers?
I have. So just to point out that is the difference, that is a big difference in my mind in our subsidy goals of those two service categories.
So you're asking for distinction? I mean, on
No,
the one.
we through your feedback, that is the distinction that has been made. We have our goals that have been made. Again, whatever you say for a timeline, not to overcomplicate things, but coming out of COVID, when we realized we needed to raise the fees at the pool, predominantly because of this exercise, we were given direction to raise the fees of the daily admissions in 1 year, and the fees of the memberships over 4 years. I don't think that that's appropriate here necessarily, but.
Councilmember Nacarado. Oh, sorry.
And I was just going to clarify something. Our recommendation is it's a 3-year strategy. So just so you're aware.
It's more than $10 million.
Yeah, hold on.
That's
We
the
got-
deferred
yeah.
maintenance, but the
Yeah.
strategy
Councilmember
itself,
Nacarado.
we had it as a 3-year. Sorry.
Just one point of clarification, when we're talking about some, some nonprofits getting the discount and others not. We were doing artsy things there at the STEAM plant. I'm not sure if that speaks to your point at all, Councilmember Critelli, but just saying it just in case it does. Like, we were showing film festivals with beautiful films, very artistic. So I think it's really important that we look at the policy so that we don't have staff saying, is it artsy enough? Like, this counts, this doesn't. And so that's a really important piece of the policy for us to implement. But I like that clarification about private events versus events that are open to the public. 2 questions. Can you give us an example of a codified fee that we have implemented right now, or is it just us voting on the fee changes every year?
At the last meeting of every single year, you're presented with a fee schedule.
Okay.
It's everything from a fine for ticket and for water. And it rolls over into arts and culture, parks and recreation. So a swim diaper, the cost of a swim diaper is codified in a fee.
Gotcha.
Whether we pay $5 for that swim dollar or $1, we can only charge $1.50. Because unless we'd have to come back to you to get the fee schedule changed. So that's what we're asking is to adopt a policy that asks us to strive for a goal, a range of cost recovery. And that way we're not changing the fee for a beer at the steam plant every single time we go to the steam plant based on how much we charge, but we could if it finally gets to a place where, oh my gosh, we need to increase the price.
And my other question is, for the impact fees, impact/exaction fees, how are those different than our current fees in lieu, or is it kind of the same thing?
My understanding is that impact fees are more like when you buy a ticket to.
Okay, I totally misunderstood that and
Okay.
thought that was maybe speaking to our fees in lieu, because I think development did come up in there. No, I misunderstood.
There are impact fees for development as well. This is more for the use of the facility.
Okay.
So by ticket, could be a little impact fee line item, says you paid.
Oh, I think it's James.
And I got you.
Jamie.
No, impact fees are similar to fees in lieu, but it's essentially an opportunity. Let's say, again, I'm just going to use a generic example. You've got a new development coming in. You're going to look at what the impacts of that development, the new residents, are going to be on the city's infrastructure. A part of the city infrastructure that is always impacted are your public parks, your public spaces, your arts facility, right? All of that infrastructure is going to be impacted by those new residents, if you will. That's what the impact fees are. Fees in lieu, essentially, we're exchanging because of park development. We don't want park development. We want you to pay. You're going to actually develop the park. The cautionary tale is a developer comes in and says, we'll develop the park, but then they put the maintenance on the back of the city. So they all have some variance in terms of what they are. The investment, the infrastructure investment fee is the one thing we were talking about earlier, where you could add a charge to an admission or a registration fee.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Councilmember Stevens.
Sorry, I thought that's what you were asking about, that reinvestment.
I just have a statement. I'm totally on board with, I like the way that you guys, the 3-year plan to me looks like the way it's broken down in individual fees and how much they're going to cost is great to be able to see that all broken down to, what it actually is going to cost over the 3 years. I think it's going to be, hard to get people, it's always hard to get people on board to spend more money. But, that's just the way the world's going right now. And if you haven't, realized that yet, invite me to your world, because that's where I'd love to live there, But, we just saw it, you see it in everything. Like, I know in the last couple of years, a good example of it was, Fib Art. They started charging a fee to get into the gate to see the music and, participate a little bit. And, just because rising costs of everything's more expensive these days. And so, this is what the city, has to do to keep our amazing facilities running and keeping people, being able to use them. So, this is just the way that I see that has to really pan out. So, I'm totally for like I like the 3-year, you know, plan here, so that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Okay, great,
Thank you.
thanks. I got Councilmember Martin.
I was wondering if I have any support from council, other council members, for staff to look into an infrastructure investment fee. That's like, yeah, either maybe we look at it with the per ticket or with the applications.
You do have my support.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, we need that too.
Okay.
Is it part of the
Is that
plan
this?
already?
I think that's,
It's a sub-recommendation.
It's a sub-recommendation.
Gotcha.
But it just keeps it on, in front of everybody.
include it in the plan? Gotcha.
and then I'm curious, I've heard a few council members mention 3-year recovery plan. I think 5-year might be an easier pill to swallow for our constituents, but I don't know how other people feel.
Of course, it would be an easier pill for them to swallow.
Yeah,
That's
so-
all I have to say to that
Yeah.
is obviously.
And I would say, I sort of think along the same lines, but I haven't done all the work that Jamie and others have done to look at it. So I don't know what a 5-year plan would look like relative to the 3. So I would defer. I mean, in a perfect world, I'd like to spread it out more, sort of like what we do with system development fees, where we raise them by a certain percentage over multiple years. But I also haven't been the one doing the work. And the only other thing I wanted to mention was that I really like this because it's going to take a lot of pressure off of staff. The special deals, all the other things, it's really stressful, and it's not a fair burden to place on them. So I'm grateful that we have this direction.
And that was my point, and I'm so sorry, but I just keep forgetting to say stuff. But the history of the Friends of the Steam Plant too. So I remember, being part of a nonprofit when we could get that subsidy from the Friends of the Steam Plant, and then when it went away, because as a nonprofit, it just, its time ended, people get tired of fundraising and that kind of thing. So I think that speaks to the partnership opportunities that Jamie brought up, and, the potential for a theater support, subcommittee under the Community Foundation or something like that we can also kind of as a community look to develop within that 3 to 5 year timeline to help. And then that nonprofit gets to be the chooser of who gets the subsidy, right? And, they have ways of doing that can be fair and equitable, so.
The number,
Okay, I'd like to wrap this up because we have
I'll have to
another,
be brief.
so we're going to have 2 more questions, one
Okay.
from Councilmember Papenfort, one from Fontana, and then we're going to move on.
I'm behind the 3-year plan because our cost recovery is pathetic. It is horrifying, and we need to get where we need to be.
We can bring them both forward for council's consideration at a regular meeting.
Fantastic. Yeah, and then that way we get to vote.
That's my comment.
Okay.
I had
What
an
she
actual
said.
question about
Okay.
just the pricing models. I see a couple of things here. Which ones are we pursuing? I mean, are we looking at value-based pricing or dynamic pricing? I mean, as far as I know, talking about peak, off-peak pricing at the steam plant, which one are we leaning towards? There's all
We
these
haven't
options.
started that work yet. I mean, I'm waiting for your direction to say, start the work, start
Okay.
working on that. And, I can certainly see there are a lot of options, and dynamic pricing is a reality because we have private weddings and we have, nonprofit theater packages or whatever. I mean, it will be logical, repeatable, and justifiable.
Okay, great.
Yeah. And we'll absolutely get there, but they needed the direction first. Okay, I think, do you feel like you have pretty good direction?
How are we feeling? Feeling? All the feels. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you, Jamie.
Appreciate it.
So much.
Okay.
Logical, feasible, justifiable.
If we can get the,
Logical, repeatable. I forget what
Just-
the-
Yeah,
justifiable. Yeah.
all right, so I want to set the stage a little bit for the role of this treasurer discussion. And start by saying, so it was back in 18 where the voters voted in favor of making it an elected position. And I will say that over the last 7 or so years, periodically conversations have come up. But the only reason it's on the agenda tonight is for the first time, We had a couple council members direct staff to put this on the agenda. So, but it has been a conversation that has periodically come up. And I recognize it's a hard conversation. It might be a little uncomfortable. And so I'm going to ask everyone that's here tonight to really try as best you can to be open-minded, to be curious, and recognize that whatever direction we provide tonight, nothing's going to happen. I mean, this would have to go back to the voters, but we're not even close to there yet. So just open-minded, be curious. And then most importantly, this is not personal. This is about process. It's about best practices. I don't have the answers, and I'm hoping in the course of this conversation, we'll just spark some dialogue. So that is what I'm asking of everyone tonight. So with that, thank you.
Great, thanks. So you have a memo in front of you that speaks to the statutory city nature of the city of Salida. We're one of 11 in the state of Colorado that fall under the statutory cities, which means we are ruled by state statute and have limited capacity to form our own different types of laws and regulations. So unlike statutory towns, which are a different form of government, there are 167 or so statutory towns within the state. Statutory cities have within them 2 elected positions that are outside of the governing body, the treasurer and the clerk. So Mayor Shore mentioned that in 2018, 2 measures were put on the ballot, one regarding the clerk's position and one regarding the treasurer's position. At that time, the electorate chose to change the clerk's position from an elected position to an appointed position. So with that change, the city council now hires or appoints the city clerk, and that position is responsible for all of the duties that had been the responsibility of the deputy city clerk prior to that time. So prior to 2018, we had an elected city clerk and a full-time employee, a deputy city clerk that did all of the clerk responsibilities. During that same election, the citizens of the city decided to keep the treasurer position as an elected position, and that's where we are today. So I reached out to other statutory cities to get an understanding of how their elected clerk and treasurer roles function within their community. And I don't need to go through all of this. You can see it here. I learned that Leadville is an appointed treasurer now. It was elected when I was a DOLA regional manager. They didn't call me back, so I can't update what their responsibilities are. So you can see here that there are varying ways that statutory cities kind of manage that elected position if they still have it. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you have some regarding that. I did want to make clear within this memo, in case council had questions regarding the role of the elected treasurer and the role of the finance director. So that is laid out in the next table. Left side, treasurer, is taken straight from our municipal code. Right side is the finance director, who is a full-time city employee, and that is the job description that the finance director is hired under. Staff is asking council for direction on what you would like to do with this information and how, if any way, you would like to move forward. And I will leave it at that.
Great. And so what we're going to do is anyone that has questions for Christy at this point, please feel free to ask. Once that's done, Treasurer Gilling has asked if he can make some prepared comments, given that he is occupying this role. He's been doing so for the past 2 years. And so we're going to do that, and then anyone that has questions for him, and then we'll go to discussion. So let's start with, go ahead.
And I'm sorry, I couldn't get this from the memo or the notes, and I also left my notes. But do we have to go with, if the vote of the people decides we're not going to have an elected treasurer anymore, then would we have to have an appointed treasurer? Or would it just go to council? I did see that one example where there is an appointed council person who serves as the treasurer.
There's also a community that has appointed the clerk as the treasurer. They have a finance director as well. You could appoint the finance director as the treasurer as well and keep it internal.
Thanks.
Any other questions before I turn it over to Treasurer Gilling?
I guess I have one, but I also have a discussion part. How much would it cost for this to be put onto the ballot?
Given the fact that I don't know the exact number and if Sarah has that, but we do have an election this year, so.
But from my understanding, it was $10,000 to $12,000.
For an election, yes, but we're already going to have an election in November because there are 3 council seats and a mayor. The mayor's seat is up, so we're having an election regardless.
There's no
So I
extra
don't think there's an
question.
additional cost. If the council were to decide to put this on the ballot, there wouldn't be an additional cost because
It would
it's
just
not a
be
special
Labor,
election.
just labor to put it on there. Staff time.
Printing. Yes, okay, yeah.
I just, just when it says, city treasurer shall coordinate any desired work of city staff through city administrator, is that in the same way that council? So it's just basically
Yep. Yep.
a similar function? All right,
Yes.
just checking that language, but, thanks.
Any other questions before I turn it over to Treasurer Gilling? Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, we didn't get you a microphone. I apologize.
Okay, greetings, Mayor, Council, staff. I've got some remarks and then I'll take questions. Salida elected treasurer is responsible for providing transparent and independent financial oversight to the voters who elect the treasurer to that important role. The elected treasurer's interaction with members of the Finance Committee and city staff occurs monthly at the Finance Committee meeting, which is a noticed meeting and follows the state's open meeting statute to ensure transparency while providing a valuable discussion forum. It is, in my opinion, that considering the challenging financial position Salida is currently facing, the elected treasurer's role is more important than ever. During this week's council meeting, I will be reporting that we are experiencing the second monthly decrease in sales tax dollars. As a result, we are officially trending in a negative direction with regards to this extremely important revenue source for the city. Additionally, based on the economic headwinds that are on the horizon, along with the state's fiscal challenges and the feedback I have received from informed constituents, I am confident that the city's financial position is poised for a financial crisis in 2026. As promised to our constituency when I was elected, I am committed to working through the difficult financial decisions we are facing, which will require thoughtful and unified collaboration. Respectfully, that must be our primary focus. That said, to move forward, we first must address several key issues being brought to the council's attention. Firstly, there are multiple duties associated with the role of treasurer, with a critical responsibility to shine a light on parts of city government that require attention. This illumination process tends to ruffle the feathers of those subject to it. I believe that is the reason for this current discussion, which is unfortunate and very unnecessary. The Finance Committee's investigation of the Scout Wave project provided required due diligence considering the inflated allocation of city's funds is an example of the work that has ruffled feathers. While dispatching my duties of my office, others perceived our oversight as a threat and seized the opportunity to attack the treasurer's role.
Hey, Ben.
As city leaders,
we understand the importance and the role, and I don't like getting into the Scout Wave or some other things. I really truly believe there's nothing personal going on here, that this is strictly process, and I'd love if we could just stay focused on process and not thoughts or
are you
beliefs.
forbidding me from giving my comments?
I would like you to to make them a little bit more measured, because I really, truly don't believe that's what's going on here. Like, if we'd stay focused on process and what you bring to the table.
Okay. Okay, as city leaders, I ask each of you to remember the important responsibilities of the city treasurer, as envisioned by the framers of the great state of Colorado, who created it as a benefit for statutory cities like Salida. Further, until the voters decide that our city should become a home rule city, the city treasurer should remain an elected position. Additionally, maintaining the treasurer as an elected position allows for autonomy and fiscal transparency. An appointed treasurer may be influenced by political pressure or personal allegiance to the appointing authority, which could compromise the objective financial oversight. In contrast, an independently elected official can provide unfettered oversight and advocate more freely for fiscal responsibility. Tonight, you will or perhaps have already heard multiple arguments as to why the treasurer position should be moved to an appointed role. While the information presented will be factual, it is a smokescreen to the actual intent of stripping the treasurer's role of its independent financial oversight that the elected role currently possesses. A role designed to act in the best interests of our citizens and greater community. As has been mentioned, in 2018, this issue was placed on the ballot, and the will of the voters was that the treasurer's role remain an elected position. So I am confused as to why city funds, which should be used for the benefit of the community, are being spent to revisit this issue so soon after the voters provided clear direction. I welcome a candid conversation to address this very real concern, a concern I believe the members of the community share. In closing, I would like to state, as the Salida elected treasurer, I was chosen to serve the city's constituents openly and honestly. Dedicated to that pursuit, I plan to meet with constituents, community organizers, and the business community to solicit their input on this matter, ensuring that I am fulfilling my role in keeping with the will of the voters. I hope you will support me in that role, and more importantly, adhere to our community's expressed desire to keep the treasurer's role an elected position. That said, thank you for your time and attention. As city stewards, I look forward to our collective discussion and the way forward for Salida and her citizens.
Thank you. Any questions for Treasurer Gilling?
No questions. I guess if we just want to be candid, again, this wouldn't be a decision made by this council. This would be a question asked of the electorate. They would decide, and that is a power of this council to propose a question to the electorate on the ballot whenever this council deems fit. That is as candid as why it's okay for the subject matter to come up that is our purview as a council to propose questions that can be presented on a ballot, if we're getting candid.
I have some comments, not so much questions.
I think because we were in the second part, we can, if there aren't specific, does anyone have questions before we go into, you do have questions?
I do have a question.
Okay, and then we'll come back and we'll go into discussion.
I do find the language around a financial crisis in 2026 to be alarming and really strong language. Can you tell us more about what you mean by that?
So obviously the federal budget bill's passed. Some of the cuts that are projected in that, I feel, will impact our economy in this community. Additionally, the state's budget crisis that we experienced this year, they were in a $1.2 billion hole that they had to make up. During CML, we were told that's going to be even worse in the upcoming year. So also, one of the representatives at CML said their state demographer told them that there's a 50% chance we're going to slide into a recession in 2026. So based on all of those data points, That's my position.
So it's not a city of Salida specific slide into crisis. It's a national
No,
and state
it's-
level crisis.
Those pieces will impact us. The cuts to Medicare will have a ripple effect into this community.
Sure, absolutely.
Also,
I
we're-
do not disagree with that at all. But what I would like to know is what does the position of treasurer as it currently stands, where does that come into play and how is that going to save us from that? Honestly, I mean, that's the candid question.
Providing the independent fiscal oversight that the role has today as an elected position.
And one more question, just for the whole group. It's true that the council also has that same fiscal oversight of our budget, too. We also have fiduciary oversight. Does anybody disagree? Okay. Thank
I
you.
don't think it's the same oversight, because there's a difference in the finance committee, which the treasurer heads. So it's a different oversight than what we're seeing up here.
How so?
We go into deeper numbers, deeper issues, sometimes different issues that don't come here, sometimes issues that we delve into in the finance committee, which is not time allowable up here. You get the bigger picture up here, and we get the smaller picture there, which the treasurer heads.
Councilmember Fontana points that out quite well. We dig
But you
deeper.
have that. We have two council members on that financial committee that also have that same. So I'm still not hearing, and I really just want like the information, the difference there, you know? And I'm not arguing it, but I just want,
Sure.
like, think carefully about what is the difference.
The difference is the treasurer sets the agenda along with the finance director, where we do not do that. We show up, we get the agenda from those two having meetings instead of ourselves going into, we're prepared when we go into that meeting because they have done the backbone of the work.
Gotcha. Thank
So it's
you.
much, much more work than what we are doing at a finance committee meeting.
Gotcha. Thank you so much.
And I would maintain that would continue if the finance director was the treasurer, that it would be the finance director and the assistant finance director putting together that agenda. The finance meeting would continue to meet and go and delve in deeper into the numbers, because that enables us to make recommendations, because full council used to go way more into the budget than we do. It was a very heavy lift. So it is very beneficial to have the financial committee set aside time to dig deeper.
Thank you. One more question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Ben, how much time would you say you spend with city staff per month?
Well,
You
there's,
mentioned the finance committee meeting.
correct. The finance committee usually runs about an hour and a half. There's prep work for each finance committee meeting, and then I'm also doing work on my own.
With staff, with city staff?
With city staff, most
Just-
of that is
Just the finance committee meeting?
the finance committee meeting, and then preparations for the finance committee meeting is my interface with city staff.
How many hours of preparation?
I would say preparation is no more than 30 minutes. So I'd say 2 hours to 2.5 hours monthly.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we move on to discussion? You had some,
I do. I have a couple comments, not so much questions. So we go back to 2018 where we put this on the ballot. The council, someone had put this on the ballot, the council, I suppose. In that election, the constituents voted to keep it as elected. We've already gone over that. We know that they voted to keep it as an elected position. And that was only 6 years ago. So as we say, we need to listen to the voters. I think it was just listened to. I think that's a fair enough time to say we should still listen to them. We also had one of our council members run for this position. So she obviously thinks it's a pretty solid position to be listened to at this point for the voters. The elected position treasurer has fostered transparency, and I know that the treasurer speaks with constituents continuously. It's not just the 2.5 hours or the prep time for that meeting. There is a treasurer that is out there speaking to constituents where the staff appointed may not be as accessible to a constituent. So I think that's a key. As a finance member, finance committee member, I did request a discussion of the position and the role of the elected treasurer. However, I do not think, when I asked for this, I do not think I asked for a complete, thorough as this. I was only asking for a discussion. So I feel like my comments were taken too far in that, because I was just asking for a discussion, not directing staff. In this case, the current staff in the finance department is exceptional, and I am confident that they can continue to find ways to incorporate the elected treasurer into their accounting, reporting, and assist with their duties. I know that the finance staff right now works with the elected treasurer, and I feel like that is an important role, considering he is with the constituents. It has been successfully done for years in Salida and other cities. Overall, considering our city budget, our reliance on sales tax here in the city, and the importance of transparency to the voters, with our trust here, city staff and elected city council, we must support our constituents who voted this in 2018. I support keeping the treasurer role as it is and not placing this on the ballot at this time.
I'll second that.
And this stance is taken with the best interest of the city as a city council member. I'm not taking this stance as a personal, if it's Ben who's the treasurer or someone else. It's completely the best interest of the city of Salida at this time, with our city budget, with where we're going with 110%, with an overhaul of our parks, arts, culture, and recreation department, and that we may have to overhaul some other departments. So I think keeping this role where the constituents can see a treasurer elected in place is in the best interest of the city.
Councilmember Fontana, everything you said, fully support. I did run for this role. I find it incredibly important to provide that transparency. And that is all.
Anyone else? Thank you for that.
Just a little comment on the comments was like, this was not directing staff to do anything. This is just, you participated in this being a subject for discussion.
Mm-hmm.
So there was no like big ask of staff to do that. And I think that this is like, it seems to be a common thread just in general. I mean, when I wanted to bring up compensation for council, we're just having a discussion. I think it's a discussion that is fine to have and shouldn't be deemed as this, a discussion is very low stakes. There's
But if you
no
look at
official decision being made, right?
I agree with you, and if you go to the action form, there is staff direction.
Well, there's no action that can
No, I
formally
understand.
happen at a
I-
work session,
But you can
right?
see where the confusion.
This is
might
just,
be.
we're just talking.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm wearing
Yeah.
jeans at a work session,
And a
guys.
t-shirt.
It's very, it's a t-shirt and jeans is what a work session is,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You bring the button up for the regular meeting. It is just very, it's a lot more candid. We can have this discussion, and it is good just to be reminded of what the role of treasurer is. You know, if that's, if just for that, it's a valuable conversation to have, a reminder. Just like, again, just like council compensation. Not a bad thing. Please feel free on this, in this board to bring up anything that you feel like you want to discuss further. That's what we do here primarily, and it should be okay. Again, I guess I'll also just say, I don't have any desire to revisit the results of an election that happened during my tenure, at least.
I agree. It's been really helpful to have this discussion. I've learned a lot
Yeah.
through it, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, go ahead.
I would just say, I'm kind of agree with what, everything's kind of been said here on the board today. I mean, just, you know, learning kind of what the role is and where we're trying to go with it, and having these discussions are what we're here for. And, yeah, I see just, I like having the role of treasurer being elected by our voters, by our community, because it just shows, you know, helps us show us transparency and, having accountability to our public's votes is something that we have to strive to keep strong. And so, yeah, just having the Treasury, as a, somebody who the voters, assigned him, I think we need to keep it the way it's going. I just want to see, I just want to, just put it out there, like, just be respectful, and, everybody's going to have different views out here. So, just kind of seeing, if we have to keep it essential, for public service, to keep things, at a respectful tone. So I just, going forward, I just would like to see that kind of stay respectful and, maintain, respect for the conversation to better, because we're all here for, the same goal, is to make sure this community thrives and the people, live here, thrive. So just remember that we're all here for the same goal, and just keep it civil, keep it respectful. But yeah, I am definitely, on board for keeping it as an elected position myself. And thank you, Ben, for your time and your expertise on this. I think you're doing a wonderful job. And that's my stance on.
Thanks for your kind words.
And I would just reiterate, as I said at the beginning, I knew this was going to be a hard, potentially uncomfortable conversation, but it was never, ever personal. It was about process. It was about best practices. I think having hard conversations like this can actually bring us together more as a council. And I really would just ask everybody, because I think we've gotten some pretty clear direction from the majority of the council tonight, is we've had this conversation and we're going to move forward. And I just hope that everyone no one's going to take this personally, because, it's okay to have hard conversations. Anything else? Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Yeah.